pacem sentit, umbrae timoris evanescut, vocem tuam sequa semper, ad gloriam tuam procedo. Deus meus lumen vitae, verba tua animam pascut, per sapientiam tuam ambulo, fides mea confirmatur.
Welcome to another episode of Facts. I'm your host, Stephen Boyce. Today, we're doing a weekly episode discussing church denominations. We're going to define what that is first. And then we're going to talk about questions that you should ask yourself when it comes to, should I switch denominations? This happens a lot, especially those who have contacted our program, because we have calculated we're now well over 250 people in the time we've existed as a podcast who have had people switch to a more traditional church or an apostolic church. I usually put it into 4 categories. Now they can be broken down into further, but many have turned either Anglican, Roman Catholic, Orthodox, Lutheran. And again, there's a lot of breakdown in that. It's not an extensive list, but we've seen that happen a lot. We've seen a lot of public announcements made when people are switching denominations, especially people that are YouTubers or somebody who's in a podcasting set himself or herself. There seems to be a lot of changing in the last few years. Honestly, I think it's a great thing. I think good things are happening. I think my generation and the generation behind me has thought deeply about church, has thought deeply about what it means to be a church or to be a part of a church, to really think about what ecclesiology they want to follow. I mean, do they want to continue in an evangelical world? Some have maintained in a Baptist world or Presbyterian world or Methodist world, but some have taken up the yoke and carried a burden with them. They have studied church history. They've listened to programs like this one, and they've made necessary changes in their life after doing deep investigation. But one of the things that I've noticed in a trend, and by the way, I'm, again, ecstatic about the trend of people moving toward apostolic practices, but they can become a dangerous thing too, because at the end of the day, people can also move towards trends and do things for wrong reasons, alternative motives, just to be seen, or some people are just going along with the crowd and not doing it out of deep conviction. And at the early stage of people transitioning, around the same time that I did over from the evangelical world and Baptist world into the Anglican world, I saw a lot of young men and women who are deep diving into church history, who are spending a long period of time agonizing over the data and the material. I know for myself, I wrestled with it for 4 years. I really wrestled with it for 2 years when it came to actually investigation, even going to certain services and kind of quietly learning from priests and bishops behind the scenes before ever making a public declaration. But now it's kind of turned into like a going away party, or it's turned into what you see the gender reveal parties that go on now. It's like a celebration, like we're supposed to be all over the internet every time somebody converts. We're supposed to have some giant celebration and party about it. And there's supposed to be a lot of drama, and there's supposed to be a lot of people recognizing it, and there should be a lot of debate and discussion. And that's one of the things that keeps happening, and it just happened recently, and I don't want to give bad publicity away towards people that really don't deserve it. But at the end of the day, I've seen this trend continue to happen. So there's criteria that I think we should follow here. I think we should keep ourselves open to questions. Allow questions to be asked when I'm thinking about, should I stay where I am? Should I stay an evangelical? Should I stay a Baptist? Should I stay a Presbyterian? Or should I stay an Anglican? Or should I stay Orthodox or Catholic? What questions should go through your mind? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to pull a couple of them up and then kind of work through this together if we can. The first question that I want to ask is, do I truly understand what this church teaches? when I'm about to make a transition, I'm thinking about, I'm going to go Roman Catholic, I'm going to go Anglican, I'm going to go Orthodox, I'm going to go Lutheran, whatever it is. Do I truly understand what this church teaches? Because one of the things that you're going to note is that any church denomination that is old, especially something like the Roman Catholics or the Orthodox, there is a lot of history behind those churches. Good, bad, indifferent. There's a lot of mistakes that were made by those churches. There was a lot of decisions that were made at crucial points involving war, involving individuals being put to death, executions of those of the opposing position, inquisitions. I mean, you have to really think deeply about what you're going to be joining. And so when I ask a question like that, I think it's very, very important for all of us to start with that question. Like, how deeply have I thought through what I'm about to jump into? Did I ask enough questions, right? Do I truly understand what they're teaching? So before I make this move, I need to be sure I actually know what the tradition believes. Dogma. I need to be catechized. You need to ask things like, am I basing my decision on things I've just learned on YouTube clips or even a podcast like this? Internet debates, or did I just see something that feels good? Or do I see the beauty and the majesty of the liturgy? By the way, none of these things that I'm mentioning are bad. I'm not even saying that you should ignore those things. I think it's good to listen to podcasts like this. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was beneficial. I think it's good to read books. I think it's good to study. I think it's good to watch debates and hear all the opposing arguments for and against the church you're considering. I think you should attend the churches. If there's a mass that is happening, you should go. You should spend time and listen to what's going on in the mass. You should ask questions about the mass. But if you're just simply falling in love with an idea or a concept, we see this in relationships happen all the time. People get googly eyes about each other. Oh, she's really pretty. Oh, man, he's really handsome. And it starts relationships. And the eye candy is the initial boom that creates the attractional draw. And again, nothing wrong with that. I mean, who wants to date somebody they don't find attractive? I mean, that's not enjoyable for anybody involved. I mean, we are drawn by the appeal of the eye and the senses and the things, and the liturgical practices appeal to all of those things. I mean, when you're in a liturgical mass, especially in a high church mass, you're seeing everything. I mean, you're seeing the icons, you're looking over and you're seeing these beautiful statues, these beautiful cathedrals, and you're looking at the scenery and the way that the vestments are being worn by the priests and the deacons, and you're looking at the lights and on all the things that are happening around the altar and the beauty of the seasons, especially the colors. And you're taking in the smells and the bells, the incense, and all that's going on. You are easily going to be persuaded by the beauty and the depth that goes on in liturgical practice. It is extremely attractive. All good things. But they cannot be the only thing that draws your conviction to switch denomination. They may be a piece to the pie. They may be a part of the puzzle that draws you into this deep conviction of change. But you cannot simply just go off of, I like this argument from this guy who's an Anglican or this guy that's Orthodox. And because he has such persuasive debates and articulation, he makes the most sense. I think I'm going to make a switch. Or you're watching a podcast and somebody talks about the great miraculous work of the church, or the depth and the history and all the things that have gone on in the church that have radically changed our world for the gospel. And because of that, you are drawn in by that one appeal, and you're now moved toward that denomination. Or like I said, it could be something like the catechism. You really enjoy it, or you think you've learned the most from it. Or if you're an Anglican, the prayer book. I mean, one of the first things that drew me to Anglicanism was the prayer book. The beauty and the majesty of the prayers of the daily office, and looking at the mass and things that are done and performed in the mass. Beautiful. It's very enticing to look at something like that and go, hey, I like the Anglican tradition. I'm going to the Anglican tradition. But you have to remember there's complexities when you even consider the Anglican tradition. See, I knew a little bit of that coming in the Anglican tradition because I spent 2 years studying Anglicanism. I knew that there was massive issues in the Church of England, and I knew there were massive issues in tech with the Episcopal Church. And so when I looked at those things, I knew I wasn't going to be a part of that. But I didn't realize how massive of a chasm of difference there is between, say, the ACNA within its own province and with its own movement. On the other hand, you have the continuing Anglicans, which I started drifting closer to as I spent more time in Anglicanism, further away from the low church, Protestant, Calvinistic, or even Lutheran Anglicans, but more of the Anglo-Catholics. And so when you're considering a move, you need to know all the drama and the history and even the inside rivalries. If you join the Orthodox Church today, you have to decide within yourself, what kind of Orthodox am I going to be? We paint this idea that they're extremely unified on things, and they're not. The patriarchs themselves have been pretty harsh towards each other as of recent year. I mean, you don't have to look any closer than the issue with Constantinople with the Russian Orthodox. I mean, they're looking at each other, calling each other schismatics and heretics, and there's been a lot of harsh language towards each other, but yet they're a part of the Orthodox Church. Then you need to ask yourself, am I going to be Oriental Orthodox? What part of Orthodoxy am I going to stand with? Are you closer to the Assyrian Orthodox? Are you closer to Constantinople? I mean, where are you at? Because if you land in certain portions and sections of the Orthodox Church, hey, you have to accept Nestorianism in certain places. Again, you need to really think deeply about the theology, the doctrinal statements. The aesthetic appeals cannot be the only thing that draws you to the beauty and majesty of this church. So when I say denomination, I'm using the word very loosely in this episode. I'm speaking of a body that has been identified as distinct from others via the Catholic Church in Rome or the Roman Catholic Church across the globe, the Orthodox Church, looking at the Anglican Church or the Methodist or the Lutheran or the Presbyterian. So when I say denomination, talking about a distinct body, a distinct church that identifies itself from the others that are around it. Now, we like the idea of one holy apostolic church, one holy Catholic and apostolic church. I mean, it's in our Nicene Creed. And most that are part of some sort of apostolic church will cite the creed every single Sunday or even in extra masses. The problem with that is we are not currently experiencing the fullness of one holy Catholic and apostolic church because of schism. And even within schisms or even within different groups, you're going to find schism within schism. Presbyterians are not all alike. They don't see eye to eye. Methodists do not see eye to eye. As I just stated, Anglicans will look at each other as schismatic. I mean, my goodness, folks, do you realize that in some continuum Anglican groups, that if you go from an ACNA parish to a continuum parish, that diocese may require of you a conditional reconfirmation. If you're a priest or a deacon, conditional reordination. But I thought we're all Anglican. Well, no, because there's different orders of Anglicans. Many in the continuum under a Polish National Catholic and Old Catholic orders, as opposed to the Edwardian orders or the Tech orders that came into the ACNA when they all left the Episcopal Church. And there's a lot of debate about authenticity within those ordinations because of women's orders that corrupted lines in England and here in the U.S. through the Episcopal Church. There's also a question about 1896 through the end of the century with Pope Leo XIII, calling all Edwardian Anglican orders utterly null and void. So there's major conflict even within Anglicanism about the orders of their priests and their bishops. And so when you're entering into that, you need to understand, even though you may enjoy that liturgy, you may enjoy the prayer book, You may enjoy the beauty and the majesty of the Mass that is performed in front of you. But you are walking into a complex, debated, and really hostile territory as it relates to the subject of being an Anglican. And you need to know that, not jump right into that. You need to study the doctrinal statements. You need to read things that are very important. You really should memorize a lot of these things. Prayers. I mean, if you're going into Anglicanism, you're going to need to know the 39 articles. You're going to need to know what those 39 articles mean. And then you're going to have to look on the other side of this and go, now, with those 39 articles, we got to read different commentaries because commentaries don't agree on what each line means, like Romish ideas, or when it says there are 2 sacraments and then lists the idea of 7, but categorically separates the 2. What do they mean by that? Well, it depends who you ask. See, these are questions you need to ask way before you go to a quick appeal to something that seems better or far more ancient than what you're currently in and say, well, a lot of my friends have already made the move. So peer pressure pushes you into a direction, whether it's something like even the Roman Catholic Church. It's 2,000 years old. It's under St. Peter and St. Paul. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's got all the history you could want. I mean, it's got the relics. It's got all the beauty and majesty of cathedrals and monuments and statues and icons and levels of influence throughout historical ages. These things are a great appeal to anybody who's coming into the Roman Catholic Church. And they can see the beauty of the unity around many of the things that the Catholics hold to. But then again, hold fast, hold quick to your seat. Because once you enter even into the unified state of the Roman Catholic Church, that is not schismatic in some of the senses as we see within Anglicanism or the Orthodoxy, or even the appeal to do so. But there are major differences in a more progressive form of Catholicism as opposed to a lot of the high church, conservative, Latin Mass only Catholics. I mean, you cannot tell me that some of the French traditionalist Catholics are in the same boat as the liberal German bishops. I mean, there are major differences between what we see in some of the trad Catholics in France as opposed to the liberal Catholics in Germany. This is something that has to be considered, that you are going into a major group. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, if you enter into the Catholic Church, it has all the bells and whistles, but it is not as well advertised as some would make it out to be. There are problems you are going to have to wrestle with, many of which coming from certain point of views are the dogmas. Now, remember, I would say that the amount of time you have to put into this is really dictated based on where you're coming from. See, if you're going from Anglicanism to Catholicism, it's not a massive jump. You really have to get through Vatican I and what you think about the Pope. Many Anglicans hold to the 7 sacraments already, especially in the Anglo-Catholic world. Many accept 7 of the ecumenical councils before the Great Schism between the East and the West. No issues there. Maybe have to add a few more after that. But it wouldn't be too difficult. But then you need to ask yourself, can you accept things as an Anglo-Catholic that are part of pious opinion? For example, the Marian dogmas are not hard to believe by many of my Anglo-Catholic friends. They believe they're true, but they don't hold them as dogma. They hold them as pious opinion. Can you make the switch from I accept these as realities to not just a reality, but I need to accept it as dogma? These are questions you need to wrestle through. And there will be a less amount of time in many cases for a person who can already believe that Mary was bodily assumed, both soul and body, and that she was immaculately conceived and that she was a perpetual virgin. See, if you already believe those things are true, but you don't hold them as dogma, it won't take you as long to transition and study out Catholicism as to whether or not you should make that jump. I say somebody who is a Baptist, who doesn't believe any of those things are true and thinks that they're borderline idolatry or heresy. And so that individual who has not had the opportunity to wrestle through those dogmas, looking at the idea of the Pope speaking from the chair, looking at it and making declarations that are infallible. I mean, that's a big, big jump for somebody in an evangelical church. It's a massive jump for somebody who's in a Baptist church or a Methodist church. So that's going to take time. That's going to take thought. It's going to take wrestling. It's going to take questions and answers. It's going to take studying things that are uncomfortable and willing to ask yourself deep-rooted questions about your own personal opinion and your preference as opposed to truth and reality. Those things are going to be detrimental to somebody who is just going into a movement quickly without deep diving into what they jumped into, and they're signing off on dogmas that if you later change, you are now under great strict judgment. If you go, yeah, I'll believe that after all, I probably should have thought that through better. I assumed A and B, when really A and B were not that. They were this. See, it can really hurt your soul to church jump in a manner of which you did not do your due diligence, your study, that goes upon aesthetic appeal, that goes upon the crowd movement, that goes upon the scenery and the tradition, or a great argument, a great book, or an inspiring individual who makes defense of that church's faith. It needs to be a lot deeper and more personal than that. So that's question number one that I really think needs to be asked is, do I truly understand what the church teaches? Number two, am I willing to submit to this authority? You see, when you make a decision to switch, especially if you're going under bishops or patriarchs, you need to understand something, folks. You are placing yourself and your family under submission of leaders that are in succession to the apostles themselves. Let's say you don't go to an apostolic church. Let's say you go to, say, a Lutheran church that doesn't care about apostolic succession. Even then, you are submitting yourself under their leaders and their doctrines and their teachings. And therefore, you must think deeply in relation to, am I willing to submit to the authorities of the group I'm about to join? So if you're moving to Catholicism, that goes into the issue of the Pope, the magisterium, the cardinals, bishops, priests. Do you accept teachings like in persona Christi? Do you believe that the Pope is the vicar of Christ on earth? If you do, well, then you can make an easy transition when you know it from conviction study and you've gone through every argument for and against, and you finally have a defense in your mind where you can look at the Pope and say, he is truly the vicar of Christ on earth. Or with hesitancy, you say, I don't know about that. I don't feel like I can affirm that fully. But if you're pressured to move forward because everybody else is doing it, or you really, really like something, or it's going to get you attention, folks, that is detrimental to your soul. And you're not only doing that, you're doing a disservice to the church you're joining or being confirmed in, because it's not out of sincerity. It's out of alternative motive. So moving into Catholicism or Orthodoxy or Anglicanism, it means you're stepping under new forms of spiritual authority in your life and your family. So you need to know, what creeds do they hold to? What councils do they affirm? And do they believe that they're infallibly teaching at those councils? What are their disciplines? What are their church disciplines to those that are disobedient? What do they believe about confession and absolution? What do they teach on venial and mortal sin? These things have to be asked, studied out, investigated, and applied personally to your life and your journey. Now, there may be a person who's in here that says, I'm open to these things, but I'm not persuaded. That is good. That means you don't need to make any decisions at that moment. That means at that moment, you need to stay put and keep studying and digging and asking questions and investigating. If you can get to a point where you say, I'm open to the idea of the Pope speaking ex cathedra, or I'm open to the idea of the Pope who is the vicar of Christ on earth. If you're open to that idea, but you're not persuaded of that idea, I would ask you to hold tight. If you're a Baptist and you're looking at maybe an Anglican church and you're saying, I see the idea of bishop, but my whole life I was taught that the bishop and the pastor and the elder, it's all different titles for the same person in office. And now you're open to the idea of that's false. And by the way, it is. We've done entire episodes on the bishopric. That is definitely false, both historically, biblically, and in any other way you want to look at it, it is incorrect. But if you're a Baptist and you're at that point, you're not that convinced as to where I am on it. Well, you're at a good place where now you have shown that you have an open mind and you have an open heart and that you're willing to change and be persuaded by the evidence in Scripture and by the Holy Spirit of God himself. And so at that point, you should not jump to Anglicanism when you're still struggling whether or not you should be under bishopric and what that means in function in relation to the church as it is set up in the Anglican communion. Then you need to ask yourself questions, particularly about the priest and what you're going to do when you sin. Are you going to go to confession? Are you okay with feeling like a Catholic when you know you're an Anglican, but yet many of them still adhere to the doctrine and teaching of confession and absolution? Are you going to look at that and go, I'm not comfortable doing that? I'm not persuaded I need to do that because my whole life I've been taught, hey, if I confess my sin, Christ, and he's faithful and just forgive it. I don't need to go through another mediator. I go through the one true holy mediator, Jesus Christ himself, right? So these are questions you need to ask. Am I willing to submit to the authority? Because here's the thing that I'm noticing, and I'm just going to park it here for about 60 seconds, and I'll do my best to time myself here. I'm watching a lot of popular channels and a lot of popular guys who do apologetics or some sort of YouTube or podcast who are making public declarations in quick and fast manners, who are not fully persuaded of things weeks before their transition. You do realize, and I'm asking this question with sincerity and concern, you do realize when you make a transition, once you go into the process of confirmation and you are confirmed, everything you do as a podcaster, as somebody who's on YouTube or an apologist, now has to be subject to your bishop. You do realize that. One of the first things I did when Facts was a channel, when I left the evangelical Baptist world and I became an Anglican, most of you did not know I was already in the process. Most of you didn't know I was already being catechized. Most of you didn't know that because I waited long over a year before a public announcement, and I waited to do that after the bishop approved the channel and what I was doing, which took time, by the way. So if you're a public figure and you're going to be quick to pull the trigger on moving to something, you need to consider the cost of what if the bishop watches your channel one day and says, I don't like what you said here. I think that what you're doing is hurting the church, not helping the church. And eventually, what if the bishop tells you to shut down your channel, shut down your podcast? What are you going to do? Because after confirmation, you have committed to following the teaching of the church and its authorities, regardless of if you're Anglican, Orthodox, or Catholic. You need to consider the severity of your oath or your commitment to what you've just joined. So that's number two. That's number two. Let me ask a third question that I think is also very, very important that most people are not considering. How will this affect my family and community? If I'm going to switch denominations, have you considered how it'll affect your wife if you're married, or you're a female, your husband if you're married, or your future spouse if you're going to become married in the future? And that changes your dating field. If you're just kind of evangelical, you're kind of willing to date anybody that calls themselves Christian or associate with Christianity. But if you say I'm going into Catholicism, the field of people you date shrunk. You're going to go into Orthodoxy, it shrunk. So you need to consider how it's going to affect your immediate family. And then if you have children, how are you going to raise those children? How are you going to catechize those children? Are you going to baptize them? Are you going to let them go through catechesis? How are you going to let them do their process of confirmation? You need to consider all the effects, not just you as the husband or the wife or the mom or the dad, or just the single guy or the single girl who has plans for the future. You need to consider all of these things. All of these things. And by the way, I would highly recommend that you make this decision if you are married with your spouse and wait for your spouse. I mean, there were times where my wife and I were having conversations. I was far, far ahead of my wife coming into Anglicanism because I had a jump start on it in my doctoral work studying the 2nd and 3rd century church. There were certain elements of the liturgy, there were certain elements of high church that I was fully on board with, that my wife eventually jumped on board. And then there were certain stages in our study where my wife was outpacing me. And so it took me a little bit longer to get to where my wife was after we had long discussions. And one of the beauties of doing this as a team, as a husband and a wife, is to work together, study together. I know of individuals who have contacted me who are studying these things and keeping it a secret from their spouse. I know people who attend mass secretly without telling their spouse. I know numerous people who have done that. I remember a guy called this is probably 2 years ago. This is when I first started down in the journey and publicizing myself as an Anglican back then. And I had a phone call. A guy said, "Hey, can we talk? I'm in a really bad situation." Like, sure. So we set up a Zoom call is really what it was. It was a video call. And in the video call, we had this conversation, and he told me, he said, "Listen, I've been attending a Orthodox mass, and I've been going through out of the week on lunch break at work or early in the morning before work. I haven't told my wife yet." I was like, "Well, my goodness, man. I mean, did you start doing this like last week, or did you do this last month?" And he said, "No, I've been doing this for about 6 months." And I'm sitting there like scratching my head. I said, 6 months and your wife doesn't know? See, I think this is not good. I think it's unhealthy. So how will this affect my family is a major talking point. Here's another thing you need to consider. I had friends on this channel who were very much influenced by this channel to leave the Baptist church to become Anglican. One of the first things they did is after they became Anglican is they got their children baptized. Well, I don't know if they calculated this fully. We tried to warn them as much as we possibly could, but I don't think they realized how big of a deal it would be to their family to see infants get baptized. I mean, folks, crud hit the fan in a couple of these situations. I know of individuals right now whose parents will not have any communication and relationship with them over this issue, over their children converting and the grandchildren getting baptized at 6 months old, 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. You need to count the cost. Jesus said these words very clearly when he talks about following him and being his disciples. He asked a question: does a man build a tower and not calculate the cost of building the tower? What if he didn't calculate the number right? Again, I'm paraphrasing. And the tower came up short and he ran out of funds. Everybody would mock him, laugh him. He talked about a man who is about to go to war with a guy who has a bigger army than him, but doesn't count the soldiers for him and against him. I mean, you don't count the cost, you're going to absolutely get destroyed, mocked, humiliated, and really in your spirit become crushed. You're going to make a change. You're going to leave what your family raised you in to be something. You need to count the cost and ask the question, am I affecting my family positively or negatively? And if I'm willing to go forward in faith anyway, how am I going to handle this with my family? That's question 3. Question 4. Am I running to truth or just running from problems? I want to park it here for a minute, if I may. Folks, I cannot emphasize this enough. If you are leaving the problems in one denomination to escape them in another, you will find twofold in the next. As the old saying goes, the grass is not always greener. There's a lot of people who made a quick move to Catholicism recently. And in that quick move to Catholicism, they found themselves in a conundrum because now there's issues going on in Rome with the Vatican and things going on with that whole gay parade and mass and all the things that happened in the Basilica. And now there's debates about what is the Pope behind? What does he support? He doesn't give us great assurances. And now they're scratching their heads. Now they're scratching their heads. By the way, that's not new, and that was going on before you jumped into the Roman Catholic Church. You just probably didn't consider some of the things that were going on that you just didn't study deep enough, or you didn't do enough research in. So when you're considering this change, you need to ask yourself, is it because I'm convinced this tradition holds the fullness of truth? Or am I simply frustrated with a leader, a bishop, a pastor, a priest, a congregation, a church, or a congregant? Or you're just tired of the denomination and all of its politics? See, if your move is rooted in an idea of escapism, that I'm leaving this group to get away from this problem, rather than by conviction, you're going to find the same frustrations are likely to resurface themselves in the next group, and you're probably going to find it on a higher level. Every church has problems. Every church has weaknesses. Switching denominations will not automatically take away all your problems. In fact, they'll find you. I'm telling you right now, you join the Anglican Church, you need to get a bulletproof vest, boxing gloves, and a really good helmet, because you're going to clash, fight, debate, argue, and get beat up by people who carry the name Anglican the same as you. If you go to the Roman Catholic Church, you're going to find that they are very unified on paper, but boy, there's a lot of problems off script. And then you're going to go, wait a minute. I thought this was infallibly taught by the magisterium that this can't happen. Meanwhile, you're watching priests, bishops, and cardinals go around definitive teaching and make excuses and loopholes to work around it. Have you thought all of it through? Are you running from a problem in one denomination and you found relief in another? That cannot be your motivation. That cannot be the reason you leave. I'm sorry. You'll find more problems and the same kind of problems in the next place. Question 5. Am I rushing or truly discerning? Am I rushing or truly discerning? This kind of goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, and I want to park it here on our last point. Am I taking time to pray, study? Am I getting wise counsel? Am I attending these masses? Am I talking to the priest? Am I reading the right kind of people who actually know things? Or am I just listening to a loudmouth with an opinion, right? Listen, I am all for what we do here on this channel. I'm all for what we do on this podcast. I'm thankful for all of you who listen in, and many of you have been gracious and kind and sent really nice letters and nice emails and nice messages on social media. Listen, this channel is not extensive in the sense of we aren't going into every single thing in depth. We are introducing a world of church history, on scripture, on church councils, on ecumenical teachings. We're looking at everything from heresy to the early church patristics. We're talking about canon and textual criticism. We're introducing ideas so that you leave this channel with something to think about that your brain has had to work through that you've never been challenged with before. And then you start a journey. We're here to help launch people on a journey and walk with them on their journey. And like I said, we've seen well over 250 people now who have made the switch, and we have helped many of you along the way, even to go into denominations that I personally wouldn't go into, but you're doing it out of conviction. I have great concerns about famous podcasters and YouTubers who are making radically quick switches that I know of personally, who are not in that mindset of conviction weeks before changes. Listen, there's been one recent, there's many more. That's not like a solo call out of one person. I've watched it happen on multiple occasions. And at this point, I think it is our due diligence. We need to do our due diligence to be deeper. And let me add this. Let's say the day comes. Let's say you've evaluated these 5 questions, which I'm going to rehash. 1, do I truly understand what this church teaches? Say you do. Say you understand it enough to go in with conviction. Not everything, but enough. 2, am I willing to submit to the authority? You've accepted that. You're now willing to move forward, and you're now willing to submit to that bishopric, the papacy, whatever it is, whatever group you join. And 3, you've asked the question, how will this affect my family and community? You've considered that. You've thought about your wife or your husband, and you've thought about your children and your parents. You've thought about your brothers and sisters. You thought about how it's going to affect all of your contacts and friends. You've thought about it, and you're now ready to make a decision. You've also accepted that you're not running from a problem, or you're not trying to escape or something like that. You realize there's problems everywhere you go, and you've thought through all the problems that you're leaving, and you thought through all the problems you're about to run into, and you've accepted everything involved, and you're ready to move forward. And number 5, you've asked the question, am I rushing into this without discernment? Am I going into this without thinking through everything? And you said, nope, I've taken my time. I've done my due diligence. I've studied. I've prayed. I've sought counsel. I have made all of these decisions out of complete conviction. You've done all of those things. You do not need a public service announcement, a red carpet treatment, an attention-drawing announcement on social media, on podcasts, YouTube channels, Twitter, Instagram, or anything else that draws attention to your decision. Now, I'm not saying that you don't say anything and you just zip your lip and go quiet and don't tell anybody. I'm not saying that. It is exciting. You made a big decision. You made a big jump. Those things are all good. Those things are all positive. I'm not discouraging it in any way, shape, or form. But you don't need a red carpet treatment, grand announcement on channels and on social media that's going to already irritate people. Now, I realize we have to make announcements. Again, I'm not discouraging that. I eventually made an announcement. When I came to Anglicanism, I made an announcement. Tyler West and I sat in these 2 chairs right behind me, and we both made an announcement. But what most people didn't know is that Tyler and I had done all of the things that I have just given you suggestions for. And let me just add, I wish we'd have done more, because I had to learn some things the hard way. I wish I'd have done even more. I don't regret it. I feel like I did the sufficient minimums to get myself in a transition, but I wish I would have done more thinking and investigating on certain concepts. But that's okay. That's part of learning. We're all going to make mistakes here. But Tyler and I sat in these two chairs right here, and it was more than a year after we had already been doing the things behind the scenes, asking the questions, spending time with bishops and priests, investigating people in the congregations, having conversations with family, et cetera, et cetera. It felt quick to a lot of people. A lot of you may go, well, Dr. Boyce, it felt like you rushed without discerning. Right. It felt that way because we didn't make a public service announcement the minute we already had made the decision. We were already attending an Anglican church, and we were already confirmed before we even made an announcement. And we were waiting to make an announcement after our bishop had already made a approval of our channel and what we did. And at that point, we moved forward. And so by that definition, yes, we did. We made this move. I don't think we need public service announcements, massive attention grabbing decisions. I am concerned that we have started a trend. Trends are not bad, but I'm concerned we're starting a trend because now it is an attention thing. And every time somebody makes this move, you got one group that gets really, really mad about it because their team lost, and one team that gets really, really happy about it because their team won. And I think we missed the point if that's what we're doing. And that's not the point of why we do what we do. So I think we should think deeply about this. I do appreciate those that have tuned in. If this is your first time listening to Facts, we're so glad that you're here. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Like this video, subscribe to the channel so when more videos come out, you can make sure you get notifications on those. So hit that notification button as well. Also, if you've been listening for a while now and Facts has been a help to you, we've had many of you give charitable donations. There is a link in the description where you can give a one-time gift or a small increments, $5, $10, $15 a month. As we continue to try to build a website, merch, do all the things that you guys have been asking us to do for a while. There's a link there. We are 501c3. We are ran by a board of trustees. Everything you give is a part of a 501c3, so you can have a tax write-off on that. You get a receipt at the end of the year. We would appreciate any charitable donation, one-time or continual, that goes towards Facts as we continue to grow and do public speaking and things like that. Also, if you're listening on one of your favorite platforms on the podcast, you don't have a like and subscribe, but you can hit follow. Follow the channel. That'd be a big help. Also, leave a review. Leave a 5-star review if this channel has been a big blessing to you and you've learned from it. That'll help advance, and it really works with the algorithms and those that are studying and looking at channels. If they see your good review, that'll go a long way. We'd appreciate that as well. Well, folks, that is all that we have time for today. As always, grace and peace to you. God bless.
Vocem tuam sequa semper, ad gloriam tuam procedo. Deus meus lumen vitae, verba tua animam pascunt, per sapientiam tuam ambulo fides me.